Go and get started. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams.
Here.
Senator Thayer.
Here.
Senator Yates.
Present.
Representative Bridges. Representative Fraser Gordon.
Here.
Representative Grossberg.
Present. Senator
West. Representative Lewis.
Here.
We have a quorum.
With quorum being present, the subcommittee is duly constituted to do business. First, I need an approval of minutes. Is there a second? Okay. Without objection, so ordered. Please call the first regulation.
Education Professional Standards Board, 16 KAR 240 emergency. This does not have additional amendment.
16 KR 240E establishes pursuant to House Bill 319 from the 2023 regular session the requirements for issuance of a one-year interim certificate.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Cassie Trueblood, Counsel for the Education Professional Standards Board.
Thank you. There are no amendments. If there's any questions, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Secretary of State Safe at Home Program, 30 KAR 10010 emergency, 20 emergency, 30 emergency, 40 emergency, 50 emergency, 60 emergency, 70 emergency, 80 emergency, 90 emergency, 100 emergency, 110 emergency, and 120 emergency. These do not have additional amendments.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Thank you. Jennifer Sketchfield, Assistant Secretary of State.
Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? No further questions. Thank you. Please call the next amendment.
Kentucky Registry of Election Finance, 32 KAR 1020, 30, 46, and 50. All of these have staff suggested amendments.
32 KR 1020, 030, 046, and 50 all make changes for consistency with electronic filing through the use of the Electronic Finance Management System and the registry deleting paper forms no longer used. Additionally, 030 changes the requirement that the executive committees of political parties with less than $10,000 in their campaign fund accounts report their funds to the registry annually instead of semi-annually, and establishes the date by which the committees are required to do so. The staff amendments for these four regulations all make changes to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record? Is that mic on?
No. John Steffen, Executive Director, Registry of Election Finance.
Leslie Saunders, General Counsel for KRIF.
There are staff amendments. If I can get a motion in a second. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Without objection, it's so ordered. Are there any questions from the subcommittee? Representative Grossberg.
Just out of curiosity, how many parties does this affect? I mean, I know of the two major parties and don't honestly know of more than probably two or three of the non-major parties.
It would affect any. The only other party we would recognize, I'm not sure if there's a certain part you're asking about, the only other party that's we recognize as the Libertarian Party as a group that can have executive committees also.
Yeah, that was my question, because it says it changes the requirement for executive committees of political parties with less than $10,000, but I think even the Libertarians would have more than $10,000.
No, a lot of the county committees don't have over $10,000, and this is brought about because there was a change, legislative change in statute last session that put this into play, but it didn't give us any guidance. This is just how to administer the change in the statute from the 2023 session.
Thank you. There are no further questions from any of the members. Thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Department of Military Affairs, 106 KAR 4020 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation establishes the requirements, policies, and operational criteria for Kentucky's Military Burial Honor Guard program. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS 13A and makes technical changes.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Yes, good afternoon. Charlotte Sands, Counsel for the Department of Military Affairs.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. I can get a motion in a second. Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from any of the members? Seeing no further questions, thank you. Please
Thank
call
you.
the next regulation.
State Board of Accountancy 201 KAR 1050 with staff amendment.
201-1050 amends licensure requirements for certified public accountants to update incorporated material. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Donahue, the Executive Director of the Board of Accountancy.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from any of the members of the subcommittee? Seeing no questions, thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Board of Pharmacy 201 KAR 2076 with staff.
201 KR 2076 amends to add definitions, add requirements for radiopharmaceuticals, add a new section relating to granting waivers for some requirements, add a new section relating to enforcement discretion, and conform to new USP requirements, including to update material incorporated by reference. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Eden Davis, General Counsel.
Amanda Harding, Pharmacy and Drug Inspector.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion? In a second. Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? See no questions. Thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Board of Social Work 201 KAR 23160 emergency. This does not have additional amendments.
This regulation establishes the distinction between clinical and non-clinical social work under a temporary permit and allows for a certified social worker who is permitted to provide clinical social work to be able to move from the temporary permit to full licensure.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Mark Kelly, Executive Director of the Kentucky Board of Social Work.
Thank you. There are no amendments to this reg. Is there any questions from any of the members of the subcommittee? Seeing no questions, thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Boxing and Wrestling Commission 201 KAR 27005 8, 11, 12, and 16. All except 12 has staff suggested amendments.
201-27005 through 27016, update Boxing and Wrestling Commission regulations to clarify and add definitions, raise from $25 to $40 licensure fees for mixed martial arts, wrestling, and medical providers, update and add incorporated material, establish an additional processing fee of $10 for licensure applications submitted other than through the e-services option. Require for kickboxing and boxing that a ring official serving as a referee and an in-ring judge shall be paid for both services. Revise compensation for judges, timekeepers, physicians, referees, and assistants based on the number of bouts on the show card. Revise provisions for medical suspension of a contestant's license pertaining to any injury. For mixed martial arts, establish compensation requirements and amounts for officials, add new weight classes and ranges, allow only 2 judges per bout if the referee is also serving as a judge, require at least 2 referees for events with more than 8 bouts, and revise provisions for medical suspension of a contestant's license pertaining to an injury. The staff suggested amendments for 201-27-005, 008, 011, and 016, amend various sections and incorporated material to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Matt Bird, Executive Director, Kentucky Boxing and Wrestling Commission.
And Doug Harden, Staff Attorney for the Commission.
Thank you all. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Senator Yates.
First of all, I appreciate you guys being here today. So the new weight classes that you had put in place here, is that just to the MMA or there's additional weight classes throughout?
That's for MMA, just to reflect the standardized weight classes.
Making it here,
Yeah.
bringing us up to the standard
Correct.
everywhere else?
Yes.
And then it was brought to my attention, had done some youth work and stuff, that we have some of the, for boxing, for instance, if we have the amateur boxing, to charge at the door for an event. There's some type of prohibition of that right now because they're amateurs, but obviously that's how you would raise the money to be able to pay for the event. Is that something you guys are having trouble dealing with right now as it relates to boxing events, especially with our youth? Because any other, if I go to a high school football game, if I go anything, I'm paid to go in. But whenever we do these events for the kids, there's some issues there. Is that something we have to address here in our committee, or is it?
So, yes, that is something that we have been dealing with. Based on the language in our statutes, we found that those events, once they charge admission at the door, they fall under our jurisdiction, and we don't have the ability to license amateur boxers or anyone under 18. So that's the issue.
For us to be able to make sure that these kids can continue to compete and have these events and tournaments and things, we got to make a reg change through this committee. Is that what your request?
Well, this package doesn't address that. I believe that is something that we had. There may have been a bill last year that didn't pass, but that would have addressed that. And of course, that's something we would like to see at some point in the future.
We have so many kids that we can't serve because we can't raise the funds because of a problem here. So I look forward to working with you guys to fix that.
Sure, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just had one question. Under the license fee increase from $25 to $40, how long has the $25 license fee been in effect? I don't know.
Sorry, I'm not sure who's the records that we found were, I believe, 2008. I don't have those records in front of me, but 2006 or 2008 was the last.
So it's been a while.
It's been a while. Yes,
Gotcha.
sorry. Yes.
Good deal. Any other questions? Senator Yates.
And then the contestant licensing is the over 38 years old. Is that new, or has that been in there for a while?
That's been in there for a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Seeing no other questions, thank you all for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Thank you.
Kentucky Housing Corporation, 202 KAR 2020 emergency. This does not have additional amendments.
This regulation establishes uniform criteria for qualifying for the Rural Housing Trust Fund grants and loans and establishes criteria for the payment of relocation costs.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Samuel Thorner, General Counsel for Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Thank you. No amendments. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Thank you all for coming. Thank you for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Board of Emergency Medical Services, 202 KAR 7555 with staff suggested amendments.
This regulation is being amended to provide the board a mechanism to temporarily suspend a Class 1, 2, 3, 6, or 7 license that has not been surrendered by an agency after it ceases to provide continuous service. Provide the board a mechanism to issue a temporary hardship license to a county that could otherwise be left without a Class 1 emergency ambulance service. Require Class 1 agencies to schedule a minimum of 1 staffed ambulance to be staged in the agency's geographic service area, and allow healthcare facilities to request that any licensed agency conduct a non-emergency transport if an agency license for a specific geographic service area is unable to respond to the non-emergency call within 2 hours from the initial time the call was received. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS 13A and make technical changes.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Eddie Sloan, Kentucky Board of EMS.
John Wood, outside counsel for the Kentucky Board of EMS.
Thank you all. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion? Second.
Second.
Without objection, so ordered. Are there any members or with any questions about these regs? See none. Thank you for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Thanks.
Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 1201 and 410. Neither of these have staff suggested amendments.
301-1201 is being amended to place a special size and daily limit on channel and blue catfish at Yatesville, lake, change the lower boundary for special walleye and smallmouth bass size and daily limits on the Barren River and tributaries due to the removal of lock and dam number 1 on the Barren River, remove the definitions section due to the creation of a new definitions regulation, and change daily creel limit to daily limit. 301.1410 is being amended to add Yatesville Lake to the list of lakes where anglers can only keep one blue catfish or channel catfish over 25 inches per day when hand grabbing, remove the definition section due to the creation of a new definitions regulation, change daily creel limit to daily limit, and replace the word Asian with invasive when referring to the invasive carp species.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Jenny Gilbert, Legislative Liaison.
Stephen Fields, Staff Attorney.
Dave Dreves, Fisheries Division Director.
Thank you all. There are no amendments. Are there any questions from any of the members of the subcommittee? I just had one question. What are some different non-traditional fishing methods?
We get that on occasion. We just list traditional as rod and reel, basically, or hand line. But non-traditional would be hand grabbing, where you stick your hand in a hole and pull out a catfish. Limb lining, trot lines, anything basically that's a legal fishing method that's not rod and reel.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm good on the noodling. Any other members have questions? Thank you all for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Department of Agriculture, 302 KAR 1610, 20, 30, 71, 72, 111, and 33010. All except 16111 have staff suggested amendments.
302-16010 through 16111 update regulatory requirements for amusement rides and attractions in accordance with 2022 House Bill 273, including requirements relating to business registration, permits, inspection and operation, safety violations, notice of occurrences, and penalties. The staff suggested amendment for 302 KAR 16010 amends Section 2 to establish that a permit expires at the end of the calendar year, and amends Section 4 to clarify submission procedures for itineraries. The remainder of the staff suggested amendments amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. 302 KAR 33010 establishes requirements and procedures for grain buying by dealers or warehouses, including licensure fees. The staff suggested amendment amends Section 1 to establish application and renewal procedures. Amends Section 4 and 5 to clarify deadlines for moving grain out of temporary storage, and amends various sections in the material incorporated by reference to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Clint Quarles, Counsel for the Department.
Mic on.
Clint Quarles, Counsel for the Department.
Thank you for coming. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Senator Yates.
Just looking through the amusement ride and the attractions, the registration application. So whenever we have like the fairgrounds and recently, you have all the different rides and set up, and you hear the horror stories. Sometimes you get some injuries, they pack up and they leave. But this requirement now would be, if me as a personal injury lawyer, I find someone who gets injured on there, where would I go to be able to make sure that each individual person who has a ride set up has that insurance in place to make sure that all of our constituents are safe? Would that be here?
You would look for a physical seal somewhere on the device.
After the fact, though, because they pack up and leave Kentucky, go somewhere else. But we have this registration, right, that we put in place.
Yes. So you can verify it before you get on it, if you see it. But after the fact, you would inquire about their itinerary that was filed with us prior to operation, which would list not only the vendor but the different devices that were used that day.
So if one of our constituents at home were injured on one of these, they kind of, I warn my kids they can't ride them because they're fly by night on the stationary. But right now we've set in place to protect people. So all they would do now is contact your office, and
yes.
then they would say, yes, this ride is registered at such and such, owned by this person, and has an insurance policy of this amount.
Yes, sir.
Let them know. Thank you.
Senator Rocky Adams.
Thank you for being here. For the record, I actually rode some rides at the State Fair this year, and I live to tell the story.
She didn't eat a hot dog first.
No.
Thank you, Senators. Any other questions? Thank you for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet Law Enforcement Council, 503 KAR 140 emergency. This does not have additional amendments.
This regulation amends the material incorporated by reference to comply with KRS Chapter 15.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Jonathan Gifford, I'm a staff attorney with the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet.
Amy Barker, Assistant General Counsel, Justice and Public Safety Cabinet.
There are no amendments. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you. Please call the next regulation.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Office of Inspector General, 900 KAR 6080 emergency. This does not have additional amendments.
900 KR 6080E amends to add a ground ambulance provider ceasing to provide continuous service in a geographic area to the definition of emergency circumstance, and require an attestation from a county government to seek a temporary Class 1 hardship license to address the emergency circumstance without an ambulance provider first obtaining a certificate of need.
Would you please identify yourselves for the records?
Kara Daniel, Deputy Inspector General.
Adam Mather, Inspector General.
Thank you. There are no amendments. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Please call the next regulation.
Department for Public Health, 902 KAR 2500. This also does not have additional amendments.
902 KR 2500 establishes a volunteer's eligibility for workers' compensation coverage during an emergency or declared emergency response.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Julie Brooks, Regulations Coordinator, Department for Public Health.
Kendall Rayburn, State Medical Reserve Corps Coordinator for the Kentucky Department for Public Health.
I'm Bob McFalls, Department for Public Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Branch Manager.
Thank you all for coming. There are no amendments. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Guys, we're going to change things up. There's a regulation. We're going to hold the Medicaid to the end, so I guess the next one we have is Department for Community-Based Services.
921 KAR 3020 and 395. 95 has a staff suggested amendment.
9213020 is being amended to add the option of utilizing a standard medical deduction or actual monthly medical expenses when determining income deductions and eligibility for SNAP applicants who meet the established definitions for elderly or disabled. 9213095 establishes the requirements for the Elderly Simplified Application Project. The staff suggested amendment makes various technical changes.
Would you please identify yourselves for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Beacon, and I'm the Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Community-Based Services.
Good afternoon. I'm Amandeep Burns. I'm the Supervisor for the Policy Development Branch.
Thank you all. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Second. Without objection, so ordered. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda are the Medicaid regs. Commissioner, if it's all right with you, we have a few people signed up to testify. Let's go ahead and let those people testify first, and then we'll get into the reg itself. So up first, who do we have?
Let's see, we have Department for Medicaid Services, 907 KAR 1025, 038, 126, and 632. All have staff suggested amendments, and 126 has an agency amendment. First on our list, I have Mr. John Bowman.
I will ask, since we do have several people speaking today, just keep your comments brief. I know last meeting we had a lot of people that said the same thing. Again, we want to make sure everybody gets their voice, make sure their voice is heard, but just not duplicate testimony. So if everybody can be brief, I appreciate it. The floor is yours, sirs. Please identify yourself.
My name is John Bowman. I'm the Kentucky Campaign Coordinator for Dream.org. I'm here to speak on behalf of these regs. I am someone that has used the Medicaid services before for dental and vision services when I was in treatment. And for people in recovery, these things are huge. It gives people that sense of self-worth. And, you know, if we want people to be productive members of society, then we need to back them with these services so they can have that confidence to get out and better themselves. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next on the list, we have Ann Perkins. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Hi, my name is Ann Perkins. I'm the Executive Director of Safe Harbor of Northeast Kentucky. I'm a domestic violence program that serves the 5 Co-Ad District, Boyd, Greenup, Carter, Lawrence, and Elliott counties. I've been in this position and serving families for over 35 years, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that Medicaid services for our families have been the most empowering and performative measures that we can give to our clients. In Kentucky, you know, we've had the highest rates of families removed from the home for the last 4 decades. We lead the nation, actually, per capita in families removed from the home. So when you remove families and children from each other, you've created a system with no support system. So places like Safe Harbor, there's 15 of our programs across the state of Kentucky. Some of us, or most of us, are the only support system for these families. So when they walk into our program, we actually provide ways for them to get into dental care, get into primary care providers, and every kind of services that they need to get back on their feet and get back to being productive citizens. When we don't provide those services, then we're going to continue to have and rank in the lowest part of the United States for health care and education and all those services that are the infrastructure for our families. Everybody in this room who has children, probably I can say to you, have you ever denied your family health care in any form, whether it's needing glasses to go to school and see the classroom, to be able to read, to be able to write, to be able to speak, to be able to get jobs, to be able to hear? All of those services are key infrastructure services for our families, who are our most important citizens, to be able to be self-sufficient and be good citizens. And without that infrastructure and without them being able to get dental services and vision and hearing, then we're going to continue to rank in the lowest part of our country for health care, education, and jobs. Putting people to work is what our agency is doing. And the only way that a person's going to leave a domestic violence relationship is knowing that they're going to be independent and can make it on their own. So if we don't wrap our arms around those folks who need us the most, who are third-generation foster care with no support system whatsoever, we're not going to have the kind of state that we envision. Everyone in this room, I think, wants to be number one in jobs, number one in education, number one in health care. So when we talk about putting money into infrastructure like your bridges and your roads and your water system, there isn't any more important person or important infrastructure in our state than our people. So having children who can get dental care and get glasses so they can see and read and be able to get hearing aids if they need them, then that's what we can do as a state when we can put our money where our mouth is and say we want to do better. This is how our state can actually do something productive and move us beyond 47th, 48th, or 49th in the country. Your money will never be better spent. I have a principal in Holy Family in Ashland who is a former client of Safe Harbor. He's identified that. I have teachers, I have superintendents, I have the former head football coach at Morehead State University. All of these folks are former victims who are survivors because they had an opportunity in one of our programs to go to. And they've all testified to that. So, yes, we are talking about the poorest of the poor with Medicaid. But we're also talking about people who brought themselves through with a support system that you all can help provide by making all these health services available for our citizens. We talk about economic development. We need people to work. When people tell me that these folks don't want to work, I have never had a person walk into my program that told me they did not want to go to work. I've never had that. Never. I'm asking you to be as conscientious as you can to understand that these dollars can turn this state around. We don't want 900,000 people, a fourth of our population, to be on Medicaid. So how are we going to do that? If you make that investment, it'll be the best money you spent. Thank you all for having me.
One second. Senator Thayer.
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate your testimony, but I've been here 20 years, and it seems like all we do is add more people to the Medicaid rolls. If these programs are working so well, how come people aren't dropping off the rolls and we keep adding more people to the welfare system paid for by the hardworking taxpayers of this state?
I'm glad you asked that question. One way that happens is when we don't have the concerted effort amongst all of us in this state to provide that support system, then that's how you're going to perpetuate or keep this, what I call, cycle of poverty or domestic violence or addiction going. So it's not going to happen overnight for sure, but I can tell you, and I've seen it because I've been there for 35 years, when I walk into Walmart and when I walk into places all over my community and people tell me that they have bought their own home, that they are in a job that is totally self-sustaining, then that's proof in the pudding. If we're going to break the cycle, then we've got to do the whole infrastructure issue, which is support services for health, to be able to get a job. That's the number one thing we do, is get people back on their feet to be able to get a job, go to school, and make a difference. So I totally understand what you're saying, Senator Thay. I totally get that, because we still don't have that wraparound component for those most vulnerable citizens. Our programs at Zero V, which is our new name, Kentucky Domestic Violence Coalition, we're probably the most holistic programs that we have in the state that actually house people, get people into school, get them educated, and get them into jobs. When you have holistic programs, then that's when you're going to be able to turn that tide on these families.
Thanks, and I appreciate everything you do for domestic violence in this Commonwealth. Appreciate those efforts. I've been supportive of funding those efforts. But when it comes to Medicaid, there's no work requirement. And all I'm saying is, all we do is keep adding more and more people to the Medicaid rolls that the taxpayers continue to support. So before anybody else comes up here and wants to give us the same speech that you gave us today, just know that there's a little bit of skepticism coming from me.
And I want to say to you that I know for a fact that most everyone that I support on Medicaid through our program also works part-time. I cannot even tell you a handful of people. I house 150 people a day in my program. I have emergency, I have 60 beds, I have 30 beds in transitional, I have 34 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments. I can't tell you but a handful of our Medicaid recipients that don't have a part-time job. If they get a full-time job, they lose everything. And that's how we've set the system up, and that's how it works. But almost, I would say 70% of all my Medicaid people work part-time that are able to.
Thank
It's
you.
a fact. It's a fact.
Do we have any other comments, questions? Representative Frazier-Gordon.
Hi, thank you for what you do in Northern Kentucky. It is important, and it is something that we're hoping to decrease the incidence of.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, I just wanted to know if you were familiar with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation.
Work with them for 35 years, yes.
okay.
I make referrals to them every week.
Okay.
Yes.
And they do have a work requirement,
Yes.
and they do cover those services
Yes.
as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you had that available as a resource.
We collaborate with every single agency in our community, in all of our communities, that offers services. I can't provide every service for every person, so I collaborate with hundreds of people in our community. But thank you, yes.
Thank you. I think Senator Thayer has one more.
Yeah, one more comment. Again, I appreciate the work you're doing, but I think, we're talking about two different things here. The great work you do for domestic violence victims. I mean, that is a calling, and I appreciate it. But there's a separate issue here of continuing to throw more and more money into Medicaid when we've got jobs out there waiting to be filled. We have a workforce situation that is untenable. We have one of the worst workforce participation rates in the country. And we have a low participation in the workforce from white single men between the ages of 34. And I'm trying to figure out why that's happening and why we need to continue throwing money at people who don't want to work, who are able-bodied and should be able to work. So that's different from the truly deserving people in the Medicaid program who I am happy to, on behalf of the taxpayers, provide a hand up to help transition them back into the workforce.
Absolutely.
But when I continue to see these stories about these 18 to 34-year-old white men who'd rather sit home on their couch with their Netflix remote and their DoorDash, it really aggravates me that they're living on the taxpayers' money when they are able-bodied and should be out there working because there are jobs out there waiting for them. You got to give a speech today, and so did I. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Got one more question. Senator Yates.
First of all, thank you for being here. And I know that sometimes it's hard to kind of narrow down on just specifically, like we're talking about the expansion of the dental, the vision, and then the hearing, and how that works in place. And so obviously really making sure people have basic health care.
Yes.
But and I completely agree with Senator Thayer as far as able-bodied people unwilling to participate. I think it's almost a theft, and it's something we have to deal with. But one way we do make sure that we increase participation in the workforce, which we have not enough of in Kentucky, is making sure they have those basic necessities, like vision, like dental, like hearing. And that's what we're here today for, right? To make sure that expansion so that people can be back in the workforce. Because the failure to do so in Kentucky has led us to be very far behind the rest of the country. And we talk about the cycle. So we want to make sure that we have ready and able workforce, and hope God willing at that point. But I do understand that if someone, if they have horrific dental issues, if they have bad hearing, if they have those, then sometimes we do know from statistics that does affect participation. So we have to look at statistics, and we work that, and we got to be smarter about it. So while I do share some strong feelings that someone who's able-bodied and just lazy, unwilling, I don't want to reward that conduct. But I do think it's very, very important that we make sure we expand those benefits to people who otherwise could participate in the workforce, because doing the same thing that we've done year after year doesn't work.
No, I agree. I have one quick story. I just had a stage 3 lung cancer survivor who could not access her chemotherapy because she had abscessed teeth. And it took almost 2 months for her to find a way to get that dental care taken care of. And it was because I had a dentist, my own personal dentist, who I called and asked if he would take care of her. She had called every dentist in the tri-state area. So we live in high West Virginia, Kentucky area, right on the river. Nobody would take care of her because no one will hardly take a Medicaid dental reimbursement. Those doctors deserve a decent reimbursement for the work that they do, and that's one important reason for this regulation to be effective we've got to have decent reimbursements for those folks. He did it for us. I gave him $500 to do that for her so that she could start her chemotherapy. She's done great. She called me up and she paid back the money that was that Safe Harbor gave her so that I could pay it forward to the next person. She's just one simple example of how important dental care was for her to still be alive today. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Perkins. Let's see. Next we have Sheila Schuster. Please identify yourself and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Some of you thought I had retired, but not yet. I'm Dr. Sheila Schuster. I'm a licensed psychologist and executive director of the Kentucky Mental Health Coalition, which is 80-plus organizations of consumers, family members, providers, and advocates. Thank you for this opportunity. Before addressing each of the regs, I just want to remind you all that our physical health and our mental and emotional health are inextricably woven together. Think of the last time that you had a physical illness or ailment of some kind and recollect what your emotional or mental state was while you were dealing with that. And the same is true in reverse. The manifestations of depression or anxiety or mental confusion are often experienced in changes in our bodily functions and a disrupted sense of physical well-being. Sometimes it's difficult to know which came first and what's exacerbating the other. It's why we preach the necessity for integrated or whole person care so that both physical and mental health can be addressed. So I'd like to call your attention to the mental health benefits of these physical health services. So we think about eyes and ears and teeth, and we think of those as physical. But each one of these has tremendous mental effects if they are not treated. Having the ability, and this is about hearing, having the ability to hear alarms, audio directions and warnings, sirens, and other communications is associated with safety. In times of emergency or when a quick response to a verbal command or information is needed, the inability to hear those commands or instructions can lead to confusion, injury, and even loss of life. Because of the impact on balance, loss of hearing makes the individual 3 times more likely to have a history of falling than those without a hearing loss. On the mental health side, if you know anyone who has a hearing loss, they will tell you the number one thing is how isolated that condition is. It constantly interferes with the individual's ability to communicate with others, to be functional in social situations, whether in the family, the community, or in school or work settings. Hence, there's a strong link between hearing loss and a likelihood to develop or exacerbate mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression. Untreated hearing loss further contributes to the lack of access to mental health treatment. We know that hearing loss is often associated with early onset dementia in adults, a condition which is very costly to both the member and their family in terms of memory loss and socialization difficulties, but also very costly to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Undiagnosed and untreated hearing loss has long-term effects on health, leading to higher health care costs. People with hearing loss have, over a 10-year period, a 47% increased rate of hospitalization. And then on the dental side, we know that dental decay and gum disease are associated with increased risk of heart disease and stroke, higher mortality with kidney disease, and higher risk of cancer and rheumatoid arthritis, more difficult diabetes and HIV management. Loss of teeth or inability to bite and chew is also correlated with poor nutritional habits, making it particularly an issue for those with diabetes. And we know that diabetes is one of the number one health conditions across Kentucky. On the mental health side, loss of teeth and dental pain result in the individual being unwilling to smile, to talk, or eat in front of others because of embarrassment about the way their teeth look, if they have teeth, or the need to hide chronic halitosis, which is the result of dental decay. One's self-esteem is highly correlated with the way in which one sees oneself or how we perceive others seeing us. impacting the sense of being accepted and belonging or not. One concerning aspect of untreated dental pain is the prescribing of opioids in the ER when an individual with dental pain is seen there. We know that there are Kentuckians who have become addicted to opioids or to street narcotics in an attempt to assuage their chronic dental pain when dental services are not available. Vision, and in the same way. These individuals with limited vision may be more prone to falls or to injuries, less able to read and follow prescription directions or other healthcare information. On the mental health side, it is crucial for them to be as contributing members of society or to see themselves in a favorable way. We're talking about workforce readiness here, folks, and there's been a lot of talk about that. We know that 90% of people that are on Medicaid do work, many of them in jobs that don't provide health insurance, or they are in caretaking roles. But if we want people to get back, as Senator Thayer has suggested, into the real workforce, if you will, the full-time workforce, then we need to be sure that they can see, that they can hear, and that they are not suffering with dental pain. Before I close, I want to bring greetings from Mackenzie Wallace from the Alzheimer's Association. She was scheduled to speak but had a conflict. In fact, is at a conference to talk about what she calls the mouth-brain connection, the connection between dental problems and cognitive functioning. She wants to remind us that she has a letter from her organization supporting these regulations and wants to remind us that of the link, again, between hearing, dental, vision, and the development of dementia. Dementia and Alzheimer's are the third leading most expensive diseases that we have in the United States. So in closing, I just want to remind you all that if we want our Medicaid members to have all that they need, both physically and mentally, so that they can be fully contributing members of society, then we need to see a continuance of these excellent benefits. And I'm happy to answer any questions, except when I'm going to retire.
Thank you for your testimony. And Mackenzie and I have spoken at great length on some of the issues that her organization is working with.
Yes, she was very sorry not to be here today. But
and we made sure to distribute all of her materials to all of our members before the meeting.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Let's see, up next. Oh, excuse me, Senator Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheila, I thought we threw a party for you and everything.
You know, the Psychological Association threw a retirement party for me in 2014, and you can see how successful that was.
It seems like for you, this place is like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
My heart is here. My passion for some of these. You know, if you all would just do everything that I ask you to do, that I really could retire. So I leave you with that.
Be careful what you wish for.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Sheila. I want to bring up a point about some of the earlier testimony. Chairman Mosier just texted me a really good point that I want to put on the record, that this General Assembly, under current majority leadership, is dealing with the benefits cliff situation to deal with people losing benefits because of full-time employment. And Chairman Mosier wanted to remind the committee that we are using a benefit cliff modeling tool to stair-step folks off their benefits versus an abrupt cliff, which will allow them a raise or better job without fear of losing assistance. So I wanted to get that on the record. And also, I was speaking with Representative Frazier Gordon, who knows a lot more about this topic than I do, and she pointed out that we do fund vocational rehabilitation programs that have a work requirement, and that there are a lot of programs out there that we can fund with a work requirement that helps people get a leg up, a hand up, rather than a permanent hand out on behalf of the taxpayers. Anything like that that helps people get back into the full-time workforce, it's not only good for society, it's good for them as a person, because there is no better program than an able-bodied person having a well-paying job, because there is integrity in every kind of work, every profession, every career, every job. There is integrity in that, There is honor in that, and there's nothing better, in my view, other than a stable family life that helps people feel like they are making a solid contribution to society, as well as leading to better self-esteem outcomes. So thank you for letting me give another speech, Mr. Chairman.
You threw an Eagles reference in there, so, you know. Let's see, we have Alicia Watley up next. Please identify yourself for the record and begin.
My name is Alicia Watley. I'm with Kentucky Youth Advocates and the Kentucky Oral Health Coalition. Good to see you all again. Thank you, Chair Lewis, for the time today. So I'm here on behalf of the Kentucky Oral Health Coalition, which is a network of folks around the state who are just looking to make oral health better in Kentucky. I want to first just echo the sentiments that you all have heard for several months now. I'm not going to sit here and kind of re-educate on why oral health is important. We've all heard that. Several folks have talked about that, so I don't want to repeat that message. But I do want to talk a little bit about some important details that we think need to be looked at as we move forward to find a permanent path for benefits for adults in Kentucky on dental care. So the first of that is continuity of care. This is a concept that's been brought up for several months, and it is still really important to the more than 1 million Kentuckians who are on the Medicaid program. So we were really encouraged to see you all look at this with Senate Bill 65 and ensuring that those who were in active treatment plans at the time were able to continue that even after those regulations were rescinded. But we still have hundreds of Kentuckians that are in active treatment plans now with the current emergency regulations that are in place. And any action taken to rescind those regulations could jeopardize their ability to receive that care. So we are asking that you consider that reality when approaching a more permanent solution to oral health care in Kentucky. And this has also impacted Medicaid providers that are providing this dental care for folks. We've seen many providers who have come to us and said that they are hesitant or are refusing to offer the expanded services because of the uncertainty around the permanency of those benefits and the impact that might have on their offices as well. The second part of this is the reimbursement rates for providers. We've all talked about this as well, and I know a lot of the members of this committee are well aware of the deficiencies in the current fee schedule, especially prior to the increase that happened this year, but also the deficiencies that continue in the current fee schedule. Many Medicaid providers in Kentucky that offer dental care are operating at a loss to be able to do that and provide to the vulnerable members of their communities. A lot of others choose not to absorb that loss in order to provide that care. The rate increases that were seen earlier this year were welcomed by providers, of course, across the state, but they simply were not enough. I am not a dental provider, so I'm not going to pretend to know what it takes to perform a root canal or make a set of dentures for a patient, but I do know that dentists have come to us at the coalition with concerns about being able to continue to offer services at the current rates. We also would urge this committee to continue talking to providers. I know many of you have been doing that, but we want you all to have a clear picture of what it takes to provide the care and making sure that providers are able to remain in the Medicaid network. This includes both the cost of care, but also examining any discrepancies that are between the fee-for-service that's laid out by the Department for Medicaid Services and what the MCOs are actually reimbursing dental providers at. In order for us to have a strong network of providers, we think there needs to be consistent and adequate reimbursement rates for those Medicaid providers. So I just want to say I appreciate the work that this committee has continued to do on this effort and making sure that we have sustainable dental benefits that can be permanent in the state of Kentucky, and also retaining our qualified oral health providers to be able to provide care for everyone, including the Medicaid population. Thank you.
It's good seeing you again. Thank you for your testimony. We have one last presenter. Is it Dr. Yao? Please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Melvin Yo. I'm actually the chair of the Department of Oral Health Science at the University of Kentucky College of Dentistry. So I oversee many of the dental specialty divisions at the college, includes public health dentistry, orthodontics, pediatric dentistry, oral pathology, adult hospital dentistry, oral facial pain, and oral maxillofacial surgery. This is pretty much most of the specialties that we have in dentistry. I am an oral maxillofacial surgeon that's fellowship trained in head and neck surgery, so I have degrees in both dentistry and medicine. A large portion of my practice is devoted to the treatment of oral cancer. So when the expansion of dental Medicaid happened I was extremely excited about it because now it covers the fabrication of prosthesis that can cover the deformities that oral cancer patients have and from its associated treatments. Prior to this, patients that have breast cancer can have mastectomies and have reconstructions easily and paid for by Medicaid. Patients on the dental side never had that. But with this expansion in dental Medicaid, it has brought that to us, and we were extremely happy to have that. But not only that, are those services covered? The additional services that are covered by dental Medicaid expansion is actually very exciting because we think it can do a lot for us as providers of dentistry in Kentucky. So even with this expansion of dental Medicaid services in Kentucky, we still have a shortage of dentists outside of the Louisville, Covington, and Lexington areas. And there's a greater shortage of even greater shortage of dental providers that accept dental Medicaid. So at the UK College of Dentistry, we feel that this shortage of Medicaid dental providers, we really feel the shortage of Medicaid dental providers in rural Kentucky firsthand. Along with the University of Louisville, we are the safety net providers for dentistry in the state. So in my oral and maxillofacial surgery division at UK alone, we see over 400 patients on a weekly basis. And many of these patients travel from all over the state to Lexington to see us. They often travel many hours just to have simple procedures, such as teeth extractions, which could have been completed in the community if there were providers. This actually places an undue burden on our practice as it increases the wait time for patients that require more complicated procedures that only an academic institution can provide. One of the main reasons that extraction rates are so high in Kentucky is due to the lack of dental care access for adults with Medicaid. Not only do high rates of extractions result from that, one can also develop life-threatening head and neck infections from carious teeth. Multiple patients are transferred on a weekly basis with threatening head and neck infections secondary to bad teeth. Many of these patients are even airlifted from rural hospitals. And these patients, when they arrive, require multiple trips to the operating room and lengthy hospital stays, costing us an undue financial burden on the Medicaid side with the amount of money it costs. But the issue is the majority of these patients have had Medicaid insurances, and they had a hard time getting into a dentist just for early treatment of their bad teeth. A simple filling or root canal could have alleviated that long hospital stay and life-threatening infection. So another disease that's near and dear, close to my heart is oral cancer. This could actually be reduced with increased access to dental care. Kentucky is second in the nation in the prevalence of oral and oropharyngeal cancers in the country. One of the things I want to highlight is that oral cancer is a dental disease. The majority of these cancers are diagnosed by the dental community. When these cancers are diagnosed late, not only do the patients do poorly in prognosis, the cost to treat these patients also increase significantly. Early stage cancers can be treated with what we call single modal therapy, such as surgery or radiation alone. But when a cancer is in the later stages, as many of the cancers I treat are, multimodal therapy is required. This drives out our per patient treatment costs significantly and may cost upwards of at least over $100,000. I'm not saying that we can catch all cancers early with improved access to dental care, but I would venture to say that the cost savings would be significant. So there is no quick fix to the lack of dental providers in rural Kentucky. With the expansion of dental Medicaid services, it is definitely a good start. Every year, about 180 dentists are graduated between the University of Louisville and University of Kentucky dental schools. I'm not sure if there's a true shortage in terms of the number of dentists in Kentucky, but geographically, in many of the rural areas, there's a major shortage. Many of these new grads are from these high Medicaid rural areas. We're hoping that with the expansion of services, some of these graduates will be amenable to returning home, opening a dental office. They'll be able to provide the same breadth of Medicaid-covered services as that of a commercial insurance. An example alone is actually, I have an oral maxillofacial surgery resident graduating in June of 2024, and she has already committed to work in a rural county servicing a majority of Medicaid population. And this, I like to say, is probably due to the Medicaid expansion, dental Medicaid. Actually, I could say that it's definitely due to the dental Medicaid expansion. An additional point I'd like to bring up is that when dental offices are open in communities, not only do they bring healthcare to the community, they also bring jobs and put money back into these economically depressed communities. So this expansion not only helps the people's healthcare-wise, but can also help the communities economically. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yo. Any members have any questions, comments? Dr. Bill Collins says hello.
Thank you.
All right. With that being said, Madam Secretary, will you go ahead and get into the regulation itself, and Commissioner, if you and you come forward.
Carrie, would you like to start with a summary?
907 KR 1025 amends to address duly licensed pediatric facilities with the amendment and federal approval of a state plan amendment, so it will be possible for individuals who turn 21 years of age while in a duly licensed pediatric facility to remain in the care of that facility and to comply with CARES Chapter 13A. The staff amendment amends various sections to comply with CARES Chapter 13A.
907-1038 amends Kentucky Medicaid program hearing provision. A state plan amendment that allows adults to receive hearing services, establish audiology service limits through the incorporated fee schedule, increase the amount that can be charged per ear for each 36 months from $800 to $1,200, clarify how hearing aid batteries may be provided, clarify that new or improved technology may be a reason to reimburse for hearing aid replacement, establish that service and instrument limits may be exceeded for children under 21 if medically necessary, and update the fee schedule. 907-1126 establishes provisions and requirements for Medicaid coverage of dental services, including adding a definition for implant, extending specific dental services to all Medicaid recipients, revising implant provisions, and updating the fee schedule. 907-1632 amends Kentucky Medicaid Vision Program provisions to make technical corrections, including for consistency with 907-3005, implement a state plan amendment that allows for adults to receive vision services, clarify cost-saving requirements in order for providers to deliver services on a non-Medicaid basis, clarify vision service limits, require that a higher quality of frames, lenses, and lens enhancements be available, clarify that contact lenses are covered and available, including daily lenses, and update the vision fee schedule. The amended after comments version amends Section 4 to clarify the referenced warranty is the manufacturer's warranty, and amends Section 5 to clarify that daily contact lenses are disposable lenses. The staff suggested amendments amend various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. The proposed agency amendment for 907-1126 amends Section 6 pertaining to diagnostic service coverage limitations to remove from the list of services that shall not be covered, in conjunction with a comprehensive oral evaluation, a limited oral evaluation for trauma-related injuries, and delete limitations on specific situations regarding limited oral evaluations.
Thank you all for coming today. I feel like we're very familiar with each other now, but please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, good afternoon. Hi, I'm Wesley Duke. I'm the General Counsel at the Cabinet.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Lee. I'm the Commissioner for the Department for Medicaid Services.
Good afternoon. Jonathan Scott, Rec Coordinator.
Again, thank you all for coming today, and I appreciate your indulgence. I wanted to make sure all the speakers got to speak and everybody, could share their views. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for the staff amendments? Is there a second for the staff amendments? Is there...
Go for a roll call vote.
Roll call having been called. All those in favor will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no. Please call the roll, Madam Secretary.
Senator Rocky Adams. Pass. Senator Thayer.
Pass.
Senator Yates.
Aye.
Representative Bridges. Pass. Representative Fraser Gordon. Abstain. Representative Grossberg.
Aye.
Senator West and Representative Lewis.
Pass. There is an agency amendment as well. Can I get a motion for approval of the agency amendment? Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection?
Move for a roll call vote.
Senator Rocky Adams. Senator Thayer,
Pass.
Senator Yates, Representative Bridges, Representative Frazier Gordon, Representative Grossberg,
Aye.
Senator West, Representative Lewis.
Pass. Okay. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Senator Yates.
Yeah, just two motions I made. Was that just language cleanup? Could you tell me, just explain what it was that we just passed over?
Based on recommendations from our Dental Technical Advisory Committee, we found that one provision in our reg was a little bit more stringent than it should have been. And so based on their recommendations, we removed some of those limitations to allow those services to be provided without those barriers to care.
And then the suggested amendments and suggested substitutes were language cleanup, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Bridges.
I'd just like to say one thing. I spoke quite a bit at the last meeting in the opposition of therefore, but I still want to stress my feelings that expanded services cost additional money. It is an expenditure, and this is not the proper committee to be doing that in. It should be under A&R. And as Senator Thayer suggested earlier, we are working on proper ways to address this through the Cliffs Benefit Task Force, through work procedures and other items. So, that's just try to explain where we stand here. I don't have any problem helping people with medical needs, but I do have a problem when there is a proper way to do things and an improper way to do it. These regs have been found deficient in the past. They brought on immediately after the last session, and I feel like this is more of a loophole or a political move than it is to addressing the real issues and doing it in a proper manner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I only have one thing to say, a couple things. I know this has taken up the biggest thing in this committee this year has been the Medicaid regs. And I think one of my first questions was dealing with communication, and that's, what we've asked for. That being said, last week, yourself, Commissioner, and Secretary Freelander jumped on a call with myself and Senator West, and really do appreciate you reaching out and, with that commitment of, I know we talked about speaking with appropriations and revenue members, and then also members on the health committee as well. And I think that goes a long way into working this out. I know other members are working on solutions for session. But that being said, there's many members here that wanted to find this regulation deficient. But, because of the communication that we are having and going forward, we believe this regulation belongs in the health committee, so we will not be making that motion today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Madam Secretary, please call the next regulation.
Actually, that concludes our agenda for this month. Our next meeting is currently scheduled for Tuesday, October 10th at 1 p.m.
Does anyone know of a conflict with that date or time?
Yes, the 10th.
Can I get a motion for adjournment? Second. Thank you all.